With Car Guru's Discover, you can skip the filters and describe what you're looking for in your own words. Simply type what you want, and Car Guru's Discover instantly surfaces real listings that match your exact needs. It's no wonder Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site according to SimilarWeb's estimated traffic data. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com. cargurus.com.
Hey, Howard.
In case you need a lawyer, here's my business card. I'm attorney Howard Ankin.
Oh, hey, Howard.
If you or someone you know has been hurt at work, Ankin Law can get the medical bills paid, the lost wages reimbursed,
Oh, hey, Howard.
and the compensation you deserve.
Hey, Howard.
We're one of the largest filers throughout the state of Illinois of workers' compensation claims. We're here to help. Call 312-6-million. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and this show is released on Monday, February 9, 2026. That's an important day for baseball as spring training gets underway. In this show, we'll preview spring training by sharing what storylines we are following out of White Sox camp. Munetaka Murakami will garner a lot of attention, of course. What will Colson Montgomery do in year 2? And how will the White Sox outfield shake out? James Fegan and Jim Margulis will join me later in the show to discuss that and their Prospect Week activities on SoxMachine.com. First, the Chicago White Sox officially announced the Austin Hays signing on Wednesday, February 4th. It's a one-year contract that pays Hays $5 million in 2026 with a mutual option for $8 million in 2027 or a $1 million buyout. As we have said many times on this show, the mutual options are a neat accounting trick to defer some money. Rarely are both sides of a mutual option agreed upon. In his press conference Zoom call, Austin Hays was asked why he picked the White Sox.
I'm 30 years old, coming off a strong season last year. Unfortunately, I had the kidney infection the year before, and I wasn't able to play as much as I would have wanted to. Last year, I was able to get my health back and reestablish myself after really feeling like I had a lost year. So going back into free agency, I really wanted to go somewhere where I would have an opportunity to do that, play every day, get back to being able to play both sides of the ball, play defense every day as well. And there's a tremendous opportunity with Chicago to be able to do that.
Our James Fegan asked Chris Getz how the Hays deal got done and where he fits in the outfield configuration.
I wonder if you could just talk kind of more about how this came together and when Austin kind of emerged as an option for you, because obviously from the outside, it looks like you guys got a lot of things done right after the Robert trade got pulled off. But I imagine, contact with him started and seeing him as an option started before that.
Yeah, we've been talking to Hays for a little bit now. We had some other priorities that we were focused on. We knew that, with Slater and Tauchman and Michael Taylor, not coming back, or the potential of not coming back, that we felt like there was an opportunity for a veteran type bat, and the outfield was the obvious one, especially after moving Louis. Yeah, conversation certainly picked up after, in terms of like the seriousness of getting a deal done. But we had interest on Hays, from jump.
You said the wings, do you view him as playing right field and left field equally, or just kind of versatile to put wherever you need him in terms of that respect?
Yeah, I don't know precisely. He's a guy that can play pretty good defense on both wings. So, a lot of it's going to be dependent on, how Will wants to put together a lineup. Are we going to be more defensive focused? Or are we going to try to get more offense today? Just the optimal lineup. So it's tough to tell if it's going to be just, left field or right field, or which one, he finds more playing time.
One key attribute to Hayes' game is his career success against left-handed pitching. For his career, Hayes is an .819 OPS against lefties, but in 2025, Hayes took a big leap by hitting southpaws to the tune of a .319 batting average, a .400 on base percentage, and slugging .549. That's a .949 OPS. Adding Hayes comes at a good time because the Detroit Tigers not only have Tarek Skubal, but they recently signed former Houston Astros ace Framber Valdez to their starting rotation. Getz comments about Hayes' ability to hit lefties, but also his comfort level working with White Sox director of hitting, Ryan Fuller.
I mean, he mashes lefties. He does. And, it's not that, he can't handle righties either. It's just, it really jumped out to us, the ability to hit left-handed pitching. When he's healthy, he's locked in. He's got a relationship, a baked-in relationship with Ryan Fuller from his Baltimore days. So, when we got on a call, the first call with him and looked at some of his tendencies, the last couple of years when he was going well, when he wasn't going as well. And I mean, it was like they were on the same page right out of the gate. So I think that increased the comfort level for Hayes coming in here. He feels really good about where his game is. He feels really good about where his body is, most importantly. But to know that he's coming to a place, with Showman and Fuller that have a pretty good understanding of his base, what makes him go, what makes him good. So that certainly helped us get it to the finish line.
James Fegan asked Hayes in what he previously worked on with his swing mechanics with Ryan Fuller back in Baltimore.
What about your game do you feel like kind of took a next step, in 23 with him? And have you guys kind of talked about things you want to work on or even enhance from there since you've joined?
It was more of the lower half, but a little bit to do with the upper half. I was really just trying to get to a strong position and hold it for as long as possible until you start swinging, and just not allowing yourself to carry your hands with you and let your lower half open early, which that's what I had a lot of problems with. And when I'm hitting a lot of ground balls pull side, that's usually it. So we were able to develop a really good routine and some good drills and things for me to do throughout the course of the season to just try to maintain that and battle against bad habits that creep up sometimes during the year. So that year we had a good solid plan. I did a lot of work in the off season going into that year to come into spring training with a good strong base and being mechanically sound. And, we were able to put it all together. So I still do a lot of the same stuff now. Had a pretty good year last year. It was pretty consistent. I had a 3-week stretch where mechanically things started to break down a little bit, but I was able to make the adjustments that I needed. So we had already talked about that a little bit of, when things were going well, when I wasn't swinging it as well, and how can we combat that, and what will we need to do this year to stay strong and move well throughout the whole course of the year so that I can have a great season for the White Sox.
Naturally, adding another veteran to the clubhouse always warrants the question about their fit, and if it's expected, they take on a leadership role. Here's Getz' thoughts about Hayes' fit with the White Sox clubhouse.
The talent part is the most important part, the on-field performance. But also, we know that what he offers in a clubhouse, how he conducts his business on the field, off the field. We have a young forming group that, young players are impressionable often. And he, whether it be Cincinnati or Baltimore, it was very clear in getting to know Austin more that, he takes pride in helping other players and being a good teammate, and had plenty of stories of how he felt like he helped influence some of these younger players as they were getting comfortable at the major league level, or trying to get comfortable at the major league level. So that certainly was a factor. And I know in conversations with Will, as he was looking at this group, especially this outfield group, it was young. It's a young, inexperienced group that, certainly, we can offer a runway. But it is nice to know that they're going into this with someone that's done it before, has gone through the ups and downs of this game, and certain stretches and playing in certain environments. Austin can help relieve any of that, the stress that comes with unknowns. And we have felt that with certain individuals, the last couple of years based on their experiences. So, we felt like this was a really good fit for not only the talent, but what he brings to the table from a clubhouse standpoint as well.
In the grand scheme, Hayes is not a big home run hitter. We've talked about it often on this show that the White Sox need to build a lineup that better takes advantage of their home ballpark. Getz sees right field differently, acknowledging that in the summer, the ball can fly, but it plays more neutral in colder temps.
You look at what Murakami could potentially do. You look at Colson Montgomery and what he did when he came up to the big leagues. We've got power, throughout throughout the offense, different levels of it. It's not it's not going to be a power-driven team. If it is, that's a bonus. We know being in Chicago that the weather isn't always, a factor in which it helps power. July's the month that usually it really heats up and the ball flies. But other than July, it's a stadium that usually plays a little bit more neutral, a little bit more fair. So to have a balance of contact and some power usually comes with some strikeouts. So we want to diversify the best that we can. If we happen to err on the side of more power, that's great. But we have some guys that can do a couple different things. But having some power is important. We know that when we've had power outages in the past, it's tough to win ball games. It is, and it's a lot of close ball games, and really, reliant on pitchers just putting up zeros regularly, which is a hard thing to do. So Slater's got some power. It shows up most often, against lefties, but he can do it to both sides. And then Colson Montgomery and like I said, with Murakami and Vargas has got some pop, and Sosa. But in addition to, the style of play and a Maidroth and Acuna, so we can really move the ball around, get on base, create some havoc with some speed, and then the bonus of some power as well.
Finally, with Sox Fest over and players are moving into their Arizona spring training digs, the offseason is over. But the work continues for GMs during spring training. So how does Getz feel about the work he's accomplished this offseason?
I do feel like we're in a really good spot. We feel like we've had a very productive offseason. Reflecting back, if you would have told me that we would have ended up with the players that we had from the beginning, I would say that I would have been, okay, we accomplished a lot this offseason. Didn't know specifically where it was going to head. It was more just, all right, these are the types of players that we're targeting for certain reasons. And through that processes, we were able to acquire the players that we have. So, never satisfied. We're still looking for opportunities to improve this club, and there's different ways of doing that. We do feel like the heaviest of lifting has happened, but that doesn't mean that we're just gonna sit here and pack it in and roll the balls out come for day one of spring training. So. Continue to have conversations with clubs. Does anything come together? I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, conversations with free agents as well. But at this point, we feel like we're in a much better place than where we were at the end of the last season.
In other White Sox news, the team announced that 5 players will be participating in the World Baseball Classic. We already knew that Murakami would be playing for Team Japan. Playing for Team Italy will be catcher Kyle Teal and infield prospect Sam Antonacci. Italy is in Pool B along with the United States, Great Britain, Brazil, and Mexico. Italy's first game will be on Saturday, March 7th at 12 p.m. Central Time in Houston against Brazil. Curtis Mead is on Team Australia, and Sir Anthony Dominguez will be pitching out of the bullpen for a stacked Dominican Republic team. The Dominicans are in Pool D, and their first game is on Friday, March 6th. Joining me now to preview the 2026 Chicago White Sox spring training is Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gentlemen. James will be making his way to Camelback Ranch soon. Chris Getz is speaking on Monday, February 9th in the afternoon, and players will be reporting on February 10th, especially for those, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'll be participating in the World Baseball Classic. That means it's time to really get ready for the 2026 season. Push 2025 behind, push the offseason behind. Moving forward, it's all about what the White Sox can do in 2026, reasons to be optimistic, and of course, it's still the White Sox, reasons to be skeptical. But when it comes to this spring training, I ask you in a roundtable conversation, gentlemen, what is the biggest storyline that you are going to be following this spring training for the Chicago White Sox? And James, you're going to be there. So I'll start with you, sir. What do you think is the biggest storyline for the White Sox this spring training?
Well, since I've looked at the rundown, I know you've already taken mine. So
you can take it. I have another one.
Choice. Theoretically, like Murakami is like the big thing. We not necessarily see him do a whole lot, given that the WBC and probably a long run in it is anticipated. Maybe that'd be interesting because they got bounced in pool play somehow and he had to come back way more than earlier than anticipated. But any sort of like the onboarding for him will probably stand out or be noticeable. Like, they have to work through him through an interpreter. Like, I don't think any pro hitting coach up to this point in the majors has at least phrases that they know in Spanish, certainly baseball lingo. I don't think that applies for Japanese quite as easily without some work added to it. Just in general, this is the second year of Will Venable. Drew Butera ran a lot of the scheduling for spring training last year, so that will be different as well. This also just represents a spring with more of a staff that he had an influence on and more of an idea of how he wants it to run. Generally, if you ask him what he wants to change, he always says, simplify, make the message even more easy to take away, which is an interesting, that's his takeaway of working with players, is to dumb things down as much as possible over and over again.
That's the Princeton talking.
Yeah, from a former player to say that, very, very interesting. So, and I think kind of what larger indications of organizational evolution would probably be something that comes to mind, since this time last year it was a lot of tales about like, oh man, we were really just kind of digging out from under a lot of crap all of 2024, and that's why things look the way they were. What's kind of the story this year would be a step forward from that. Outfield battle was also interesting. I'm sure you can get into that.
You can take it. I have others. You can take the outfield.
I just did a bunch of whole other stuff. You're on your own now. You're on Outfield Island.
All right. Before we get to Outfield Island, how about you, Jim? What is the big storyline that you're going to be following this spring training?
You took Outfield Island. No, I think with the World Baseball Classic happening, like the Kyle Teal participating in it, that kind of takes the catcher duel out of the way a little bit, like a lot of runway for Edgar Caro, I suppose, in terms of just getting first team reps, if you can call it that. It's not quite as clear as like NFL preseason, but still. The starter battle, back of the rotation, I'm particularly curious about David Sandlin, given that the White Sox went out their way to trade for him, given that they've talked him up as somebody who could be a mid-rotation arm or better, and will be competing for a job. It feels like overstating his the likelihood a little bit to say that he's like in the thick of it. But if Chris Getz is looking for pitchers who can keep Jonathan Cannon and Sean Burke honest, like I guess he would be one of them if he showed out. So and it's always difficult, I think, in spring training, especially in Arizona, using the desert environment to audition pitchers and figure out like which one is actually doing, faring the best or is most projectable going to the regular season. So I am curious to see how pitchers are judged when it comes to winning that fourth and fifth spots and settling the bullpen. Sean Newcomb is also on the outside looking in, but may not be, given the way they've talked about him. So there's some open-endedness there. And then I think subplot would be Colson Montgomery. Just I think a lot of the White Sox beating their schedule or forcing Chris Getz to actually announce a schedule for when he intends to compete kind of runs through Montgomery. and being somebody who's bankable. Whether it's, he was on a 6-win pace last year, whether that kind of settles down into, a 3 or 4 WAR player, depending on the defensive metrics, where they even out, how he negotiates the power contact issues, or the power strength and the contact weaknesses, how that balances out. But like, it's a very important spring, or very important start of the season, just to not have a relapse. I think he's allowed to run hot and cold and figure it out and adjust to adjustments and so forth. But I think the 41% strikeout rate, the Arizona sabbatical, the very narrow band of pitches he was able to hit, like, falling back in that form, I think would really cause some problems for the White Sox in terms of generating excitement. So him holding serve basically is what you want to see.
Got it. So I got all of Jim's storylines, I think, for spring training. Let's talk about Outfield Island.
Okay.
That James has now
You have the floor.
coined the phrase. As I mentioned in the intro earlier in the show, I think it's a good signing by the White Sox now in retrospect, knowing that Tarek Skubal is still going to be part of the Tigers, even though he's going to get paid $32 million. And now the Tigers add to their rotation with Framber Valdez. That is a pretty devastating 1-2 punch. Both have, obviously, Skubal's got the Cy Young. Valdez has pitched well enough at times in his career to deserve, or at least get merit into the conversation of being the American League Cy Young. Those are two tough lefties. And now the White Sox having Austin Hayes, that signing makes a lot more sense for them, and that is a good addition. But it is center field, and it is right field. Even if Hayes does play in right field, how much can Andrew Benintendi actually play in left field? Jim, I feel like we've been talking about the outfield all off season, and it really becomes a glaring conversation after trading Luis Robert. Austin Hayes helps, but can Luis Angel Acuna actually take care of center field? And if somebody gets hurt, what does his outfield depth look like? We saw a lot of Joshua Palacios last year, probably against our will at times. And Michael A. Taylor, I think in his last season, we didn't know it was his last season, but he played the best that he could possibly play, even though he played over 100 games. Somebody in this roster, outside of Austin Hayes and Andrew Benintendi, Jim, is going to play more than 100 games for the White Sox, whether we think it's a good idea or not.
Yeah, golden opportunities abound. I think it would be the positive way to spin it for Acuna,
Yes.
who didn't have runway with the Mets. And like, he's, expanding his skill set in the outfield, I think, is a worthwhile project. And he's, fared well enough, in terms of like the ability to make contact. He's not somebody who looks overwhelmed, a game or two at a time. You just notice it like after a week or so, like, oh, he's hitting like 180 and not getting the ball off the ground. So he's not somebody who's going to look overmatched. So there's, it's worthwhile to give him some run. Same thing with Brooks Baldwin, the way he played in the second half. We talked to Will Venable at the winter meetings and said that he liked Baldwin in the outfield, especially, center field, maybe more than the corners. So there's an opportunity for him there too. And then you have Derek Hill, who's, I would consider him the new Michael A. Taylor in terms of right-handed outfielder who's defense first, base running. He doesn't have the veteran pull that Taylor had, like kind of like the coach among players respect that Taylor had. But in terms of somebody who's got a good enough glove and the speed to hold down a bench spot at some point, like this is his best opportunity, maybe his last best chance to stake his claim to a roster spot for a full season. So I think, it's dicey. And this is why, like, we were talked about the over-under before they signed Austin Hayes. Like, there's a chance all of these fail to pan out. And then what do you have? You're back to the Joshua Palacioses of the world, and nobody likes that. But I think with, Hayes in the fold, we'll see, whether Benintendi's Achilles cooperates. But if they do, and if Benintendi is like a 2-win player, which is not exciting, but fine. And if Hayes is a 2-win player, not exciting, but fine. There is a little bit of upside in that center field mix to where they might get somebody who shakes out as another average player who's cheap and under team control and holds down a roster spot that they don't have to worry about for a few years as they try to address bigger problems.
James, as far as like divvying up playing time, the White Sox first spring training game is not until February 20th, but will we have like any I don't know, how quickly can we gain insight on who could be the favorites to gain those outfield spots?
Late April.
Great.
I forgot to mention Kelenic. In terms of Kelenic is also
Yes.
in that mix of helping Benintendi
I mean,
out as a
Kelenic's
backup.
been mentioned by Getz as like their kind of favored NRI, and then someone they've kind of talked about, at least with the seriousness level of anyone who has an actual roster spot rather than a non-guaranteed contract. But I think seeing maybe how much Benintendi plays out there or how he looks, given how much they've discussed it. I mean, Getz said he's more or less full go or in a good place to start the spring. So I don't know if he'd see any more limitation than just you expect from a 10-year vet being eased into action and not playing back-to-back very often. But I mean, if Pereira looks like he's still striking out 40% of the time in spring, that tells you something. If Kelenic doesn't really do anything of consequence, that might tell you something. But if he's crushing the ball because he's just getting a lot of crude fastballs from guys getting things figured out, that might not be that indicative either. I really think it's something that shows out over time. You'll probably see a lot of like Brooks Baldwin playing center to see how viable he is out there, because that's kind of an unsettled picture. And you're probably going to see a lot of Luis Angel Acuna playing out there because they have to figure out how viable that is as well, even though the speed dictates it should be. Really, reps is the thing he's missing out there, so that's what you need to attack. I think the mix is something that will probably evolve over the course of the season, and Austin Hayes probably having a pretty clear route to starting in left field or right field on any given day is one of the few things you can really bank on as a fixture, for which is why that signing was so necessary. But I think it's something that will shake out a lot over the course of the year and probably be different in July than it is in April. So yeah, what will we get from the lineup for the first day against the Cubs? Probably not much.
So the White Sox could carry 5 outfielders, or at least 5 players that can play in the outfield on opening day?
I would think you want that in general, but certainly for them, I would say that given that their infield picture looks more or less stable until like injuries or attrition pop up in some way. But with Mydroff being able to cover second, you could probably say like, we have Lenny Sosa here, we have 5 infielders, we're more or less fine. Maybe Curtis Mead has the WBC of all time and forces his way in the picture some way. Maybe, as normally happens, someone strains a hamstring by way of practicing baseball for a month and a half in a desert where everyone's dehydrated all the time, which is the more stable of the 2 spring training locations climate-wise for baseball. I'm sure that's going to go great over the next 10 years. I'm really excited for them as an industry.
See, I did offer Outfield Island to you. My other item was, what are the White Sox going to do with the out of options guys? We've seen Brian Ramos being traded for cash considerations to Baltimore, only for the Orioles to later DFA him, and now he's been claimed by the St. Louis Cardinals. So bravo, that free cash. You gotta love that type of trade. Free cash for the Chicago White Sox. But Lenny Sosa, Curtis Mead, James, do the White Sox have any idea on how they're going to use these guys? I mean, at this point, just looking at the roster, the projected roster, they are strictly bench guys. And I know that might be hard to swallow for the Lennonites, James, because Lenny Sosa did lead the team in home runs last year, but that really seems to be his only route of making the team. And of course, you still have Corey Lee as well in consideration.
They're certainly not sure what to do with Lenine long term. He's second base and first base are his positions. He's not really proven at either of them, or is proven to be kind of a wild card at both of them. His hands are pretty good as far as like infield in terms of fielding grounders. I'm sure you've seen him do chaotic things with his hands, but like in terms of like a scouting perspective, those are pretty solid. But his range is limited at second, and at first he's just clearly not that familiar with playing the position in a way that can't be kind of waved off from what we've seen. But he can hit, so I think I don't think they're going to. I would be surprised if Lenine leaves the way Brian Ramos left for essentially nil value. Knowing that he has real power production, I think they're going to try to roster that if they can. And if he's leaving, it's because they can get value back for it. Mead is the one where, he doesn't get brought up in any of their off-season talk about their future plans. Didn't was pretty similar to when he looked in Tampa Bay, where it's like, all right, the bones of like a competent approach and enough contact are here, but he's not tapping into the pull power that is supposed to be what his profile is all about. So, and not seeing that kind of click with somewhat regular time last year, I think he's on the outside looking in, and he doesn't offer like a ton of positional versatility. Like he's supposed to play second, but hasn't done that very much. I don't know how well you can project him there. So I think he could follow the Ramos path pretty easily. At the same time, if their injuries in spring, which literally always happens, he could be useful to have around, or someone you throw some starts to, or has a bit more runway than it looks like right now. But I think it could easily go the Ramos route as well at this point. Maybe he clears waivers, maybe not. I'd probably say no. But that's definitely a pickle. Who's the other guy?
Corey
Lee. Well, I think definitely the outfield was like a conscious effort last year of like, well, let's add a little bit more versatility, and there's more of a path there, and injuries could clear something up for him always as well. I think Drew Romo getting claimed or going unclaimed through waivers was probably not so helpful for Lee, because it's like now we can look and see that there is a real third catcher that we would call up and not feel hesitant like having him catch once or twice a week if there is a need, which is kind of what Lee was really filling, like a gap in the farm system, which is a topic for later. It's like there's not really any catching depth beyond him that you would throw into a major league game. So if Romo's still around, that's probably pretty useful to the Sox. And I think just they like him defensively more than like the rest of their org. I think they view him as a big league defender who's made some strides like in game management, and obviously has the big arm. He hasn't been a good framer, but he hasn't been like an awful framer either. It's a third catcher type of bat at this point until he shows more. Like he started out pretty good at AAA last year, but it faded. Like he has good tools. He can hit the ball hard. It's a little bit too much. It's a lot of swing and miss whenever he chases, and he chases a little bit too much. So I think he's on that fringe where if they really had, like, he's just not like the biggest upside project they could have as far as like guys to carry as their 26 man or spare or the other out of options, things they consider. Like, would you rather have a third catcher who has defensive versatility, or would you rather have Lenny Sosa who hit 22 home runs last year? Lee's not without value or merits. I just think if like you're squeezed for spots, I'd probably leave the guy who's hit at this level a bit more. So he's talented enough that I'd be worried that he would get claimed off waivers, certainly for other teams that need a catcher like him. I just think he's really kind of on a fringy case because the offense hasn't been there, and you kind of know what you're doing long-term catching wise, and it doesn't necessarily have him in a central role. So as much as like, oh man, if they trade Edgar Carroll at the deadline or next year and they're scrounging to go find another backup, you can find yourself being like, oh man, we should have kept Corey Lee. But I also think it's not like this upside role of like, this is a future starter or regular for us in some way where they're going to move heaven and earth to make sure he stays in the org somehow.
You can always find a backup catcher in free agency too. Like if that becomes a concern for the White Sox, like if they're really sold on Kyle Teal. You
can, but sometimes you wind up like stuck with a guy who's like hitting 150 or something like that. Like it's not like automatic or easily. It's not everyone has a 40-man spot when someone like Drew Romo goes away. But I think at this point you could also be like, Romo's not going to hit any more than Lee probably, but we feel fine with this if we lose it. So I think that's a little bit of protection for them to not feel like, oh, one of our catchers went down. Now we have to call up somebody from AA or something like, or we don't have anybody that we feel super like ready to throw into a major league game. I think Romo provides that little layer of protection for them.
But if the catcher bats 150, but he's got an excellent throwing arm, James, and excellent leadership skills, isn't that worth it?
For what? Well, worth it to what degree?
Did Martin Maldonado actually hit 150? Did he hit that high?
Spiritually in that territory.
Sure. Spiritually, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the outfield island, Murakami.
Maldonado hit 119.
119.
I know he got over 100, and I couldn't remember how high, but yeah, 119.
So the out of options guys, And then I guess the bullpen, Jim, that's another area that we're going to be watching, is to see and how this gets filled out for the White Sox. Because there are some veteran arms that we spoke in our previous podcast episode that have been added as non-roster invitees, that if the White Sox wanted those veteran arms over, let's say, the Rule 5 guys, that could make some tough decisions for Chris Getz.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the Rule 5 strategy that they had, with A-ball arms, high A arms, trying to get them straight to the majors. That has narrowed, adding Jordan Hicks, if he is healthy and, able to provide even like medium leverage relief would be fine. Sean Newcomb, depending on where he ends up, if he doesn't win a rotation spot, he's there in the bullpen. You have Sir Anthony Dominguez, who along with Taylor and Leisure, that's your high leverage unit. So really there only seem to be about like one spot, maybe two spots. Even Tyler Gilbert's out of options, so he's somebody who needs, I think he's pitched well enough to warrant a job, provided he's healthy. So yeah, it's a very narrow band, I think, for assuming full health for everybody, that a guy like a Rule 5 pick like Paez or Alberto can win a spot. So I think I wouldn't call it settled, but I think, Chris Murphy's might be on the outside looking in, but he could feasibly win a spot. Wickelman Gonzalez could win a spot. I think they have probably about 10 guys, maybe 11 guys for those 8 spots, where if all shook out and, there was a leverage ladder of sorts to open the season with, you'd say like, that's not bad. They've certainly seen worse. I think maybe the left side might be the unsettled part a little bit. Brandon Eisert's, I think he's decent, just maybe a little bit overworked last year. Gilbert's, maybe he'll be able to help if he's not the long relief guy, and he can appear more in more situational appearances versus opening or throwing multiple innings. Things to work out, especially if Newcomb is on the left side, like he helps there. So yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it's gonna be much of a battle unless like there are a couple injuries, and all of a sudden you will see, I think, more variance with who might be able to work their way in and how much forgiveness those Rule 5 guys get.
Well, let us know in the comments section what you guys are going to be paying attention to this spring training. There'll be lots to discuss for the Chicago White Sox as they try to finalize their 26-man roster for the 2026 season. I know James already mentioned it, but injuries do happen. We are well aware of that in this podcasting as long as we have, somebody is going to get hurt. We're going to be seriously talking about guys that we didn't even know that were on the team, maybe competing for a chance to be on the opening day roster. We spent a lot of time last year talking about Brandon Drury. None of that came to fruition. Jacob Amaya was the opening day shortstop. Memories. But hopefully this time around in 2026, the White Sox can keep their players healthy, and we have a better understanding. At least the infield, I think, has a chance to be average or above average. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of conversation about the outfield, who looks good out of the starting pitchers to merit those open spots, and who is going to be part of the White Sox bullpen. Again, huge thank you to all of our Sox Machine subscribers. You guys make it possible for James to be down in Arizona for the next couple of weeks, as he'll be reporting from Camelback Ranch for us. And again, we'll have all those quotes, not only from Chris Getz, but also Will Venable, other coaches and players as well, while James is down in Arizona. If you are currently not a Sox Machine subscriber and would like this exclusive coverage of the Chicago White Sox spring training, sign up at soxmachine.com/products. The final thing we'll talk about on this podcast is that on Sox Machine, Prospect Week is wrapping up. If you haven't gotten a chance, Jim and James have been writing thousands upon thousands of words regarding the Chicago White Sox farm system, attacking it from all different angles. Up-and-comers, guys that are coming off the injured list, and then eventually releasing their top 10 White Sox prospects. But I ask you, Jim and James, and Jim, I'll start with you. After concluding this exercise, how do you feel about the state of the White Sox farm system?
I feel like they understand better what they're up against. You saw a little bit of this towards the end of the Rick Hahn era, but even then, like the Jacob Gonzalez pick kind of got in the way and kind of showed how easily they could kind of fall back into old habits. or just kind of old mindsets. But it does seem like they are aiming for a lot more upside with the draft, a lot more prep picks, a lot more tools, velocity, speed, etc. And then counting on trades to fill in more of the gaps, like more of the, we need a fourth starter, a fifth starter. Maybe we can acquire a David Sandlin or a Duncan Davitt or something like that and see if we can coach them up and get them where they need to be. Or, infielders, like William Bergoya, getting him for Tanner Banks. Like another example. I think part of it's they know they're going to be trading a lot of guys. They're going to be trading whoever might be useful to other teams and don't figure to be in their long-term plans. So maybe they did count on having this avenue open, and maybe the strategy will shift a little bit when they aren't trading anybody who's not nailed down. But I think you're seeing with the prep picks like Billy Carlson, you're seeing it with like the way Colson Montgomery has panned out, the way Noah Schultz, his trajectory is a little bit off, but like I think they've seen enough reward from this to keep going and keep pushing, and it does afford them to have some athletes and some young for the level guys. Caleb Bonnemer is pretty much top on most people's list, or at least top two across the board. And so it seems like they're on that track to try to provide their own star talent themselves. The weakness is like they still don't have an international system. They still don't have anybody populating the list from the outside, aside from like Javier Mogollon, who's like 20th-ish, when it comes to like the consensus rankings. When you see teams like the Brewers, who are, graduate guys and still remain in the top 10 or top 5, or even some people think they're the best, they're doing it internationally in terms of just, replenishing the talents, just kind of hitting that button over and over again. So they are fighting with one arm tied behind the back a little bit, but I think they are trying to make more of the shots that they do have through the draft. And it looks better. And, I would consider them like, I think Keith Law is the high guy. I want to say 8th or something like that. He ranked him, and then you see him as low as 20th. And I think they're like middle third. It feels like at this point, one more group of graduations might knock them down. And I think that's where, getting that international component up to speed in the next few years, I think will help to avoid these lulls when they have a big class graduating and trying to restore the cupboard.
James, you already went through this exercise once on Fangraphs.com, but doing it again for Sox Machine, do you feel differently about the White Sox farm system than you did previously?
Yes and no. I guess to reference the Fangraphs thing, I'm currently working on the Cardinals system. It's probably one of the top 5 systems in the game, and there's an easy path to doing it. They're doing like a ton of sell-off trades right now, so they're constantly been filling it with, I want to say there's like 15 guys on their list are from trades and around that territory. I need to count again.
Sounds familiar. Yeah, been there.
So like they don't, like the White Sox have a very encouraging number of like guys who I think in the top 100 conversation, if you want to like put like the 6 guys I put top 100 grades on and then add Billy Carlson, like that's because he's been on a couple lists as well, and probably like the best candidate to jump in there. That's a pretty impressive amount compared to other teams. What like doing the Cardinal stuff is just like the depth is so much more robust. Like we spent some time talking about Luis Reyes in our write-up because he's this rare like Dominican arm that came through their IFA process and actually looks relevant now. And I think it's a reliever. He's very slider forward for a 20-year-old, or I think he's 20. Anyway, an A-ball guy, like that's already how he's getting by. So that kind of suggests reliever to me, even though he's throwing enough strikes to start. On top of like the Cardinals just having Yoiker Friardo, who the White Sox used to have, who's very similar. They got like 10, 15 sort of guys like that. Like the way just not having like an international system providing that level of like relievers, spot starters, utility guys, just like this deep layer of bench options, but also guys who can, complete trade packages very easily without missing it too bad. It's something that the White Sox just aren't going to be able to replicate into the international systems up and running, which, even with if you have the highest opinion of what David Keller and company have done so far, it's still just like a couple of years away from like being reality. But similar to what Jim said, like of that group of 7 guys who are at the top, 5 of them are prep picks who have kind of jumped up. So like that's an organization that, it's great JJ Lally quote in the cross check for the White Sox is like, we're not going to sign our Aaron Judges in the open market. We have to find them and draft them. That's their approach. Like, they're not going to, muscle teams out financially in free agency or with veteran acquisitions. They know they have to take shots at ceiling, and they're hoisting them up from the logo once they cross half court all the time, and credit to them. And they're landing a couple with kind of, especially with like McDougal and Opper, guys who weren't relevant on the national stage until they improved a lot in their farm systems. That's super encouraging stuff to happen for them. It's a lot of things moving in the right direction. It's also like, if this is going to be a team that's trying to win in the Brewers or Rays fashion, on top of the fact we're already looking at the Brewers Rays in a decade plus of them operating the way they have, and be like, how do those orgs ever get over the hump? You're wondering kind of the same thing for the White Sox a little bit, and they're still trying to get up to that level. So like they're definitely executing a vision that you can see signs of progress of them moving towards, and why they do that. The idea of like, will they ever have this, player development engine that's so strong that allows them to compete, let alone like, with the Yankees and Dodgers at some point on a national stage, but just like makes them relevant in the division annually. I don't know. It just feels like seeing them take real steps toward it only like drives home how much farther there is to go, or how many steps are necessary. Just like if I watched Tim Anderson do like his little like mini band warm-up routine when I wasn't working out, I'd be like, oh, that looks really hard. And then I do something with mini bands, like, oh, what he's doing is impossible, and I'll never do it as long as I live. That's kind of like a feeling you can get watching the White Sox like kind of start inching towards like the top player development orgs in the league. It's just like, oh, they're really starting to do stuff that mirrors them now. Oh, that means we're like 2 steps through a 12-step process. Okay. So it's simultaneously encouraging and humbling a little bit. With moving in the right direction just shows how much of the teams have been moving in that direction for a while now.
How many draft classes do you think you'll take for the White Sox to kind of buy time for that international system to be built up, James?
You can't. You can't replicate it through draft class. Like, it can't be done. That's what I'm saying. Like, they've had good drafts. They've had some mediocre drafts. I think like their success rate over the last 5 years is not like abnormal, and maybe you can even argue that it's good, given that you have some of these prep picks topping your list and getting a lot of acclaim. I think it only drives home the fact that you cannot replicate the depth that an international system gives you through just having good drafts, especially not a 20-round draft, or God knows what it'll be after the next CBA attempt to destroy baseball in this country for the sake of short-term profit, which is basically the MLB ownership's long-term strategy. So, yeah, I don't think you can replicate it.
All right, fair enough. Now, I enjoyed your guys' Prospect Week coverage. If you didn't get a chance to read it, again, go to soxmachine.com. Next Friday will be my college baseball opening day post, which is, last I checked, over 2,800 words, previewing the upcoming season for college baseball, which also kicks off our 2026 MLB draft coverage. So not only with spring training, we'll also be covering daily the minor league baseball action for the White Sox when that season starts. And Charlotte's going to start at the same time as MLB, Jim?
Yes. Or like just the weekend after.
The weekend after. So early April, and then everybody else also starts in April for the White Sox. Weekly, we will be checking in with the MLB draft report, reporting on how the top prospects are faring both on the college and high school level. Yes, we will have a weekly Rock report to let you know on how Rock Chalowski is progressing through the season, and if anybody else is seriously challenging him for the number 1 overall pick for the White Sox. And again, we'll also pay attention to options the White Sox could take in the 2nd and 3rd rounders. You might see me at a local high school in the Chicagoland area watching some of the White Sox area code players play their high school baseball, because we know the White Sox love themselves their area code players. But I mentioned that with the prospects, as the international system ramps up, hopefully we can start seeing that system bear some fruit. And hopefully the high school prospects of the White Sox drafted, Colson Montgomery, Noah Schultz, Caleb Bonham, take a step forward for them in their production in 2026 to give the organization that extra variable that they did not have under Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn, Jim. That's covering the draft under Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams. We always X'd out the high school players because they were just not very good at developing teenagers. But I think it does give me some solace knowing that while we wait for the international system to build up, and James is right, you can't replace the international system solely through the MLB draft. You can't do it. But the success they've had with the teenagers they have drafted and developing, when they start getting more teenagers from the international system, that gives me hope that maybe this organization is really turning a corner. And instead of just having 1 or 2 good years, as we saw in the past rebuild, they could have that sustained success they've been looking for since, the mid-2000s?
Yeah, at the risk of opening a whole can of worms at the end of the show, I am curious when it comes to the hit rate on prep picks, versus their few dalliances with it last decade, just how much private coaching impacts the White Sox ability to get results and get matriculation for these guys if they're working on the side, if there's just a better idea of how to make the best use of those 18 to 20 years in terms of adding strength and knowing where your swing needs to be, et cetera. Perhaps, it helps them and it won't lead them to outsource that development to colleges, which is what they basically did. At that point, then you get to the idea of if, the international picks don't have their private coaches, will they have to figure out how to do it themselves or learn the through lines of what they've been doing on the side? And yeah, probably, but that'll be a nice problem to have when they actually have, guys with expectations worth developing internationally and really setting those expectations, seeing them work on fulfilling them.
I don't know if the White Sox have a serious chance of being a winning team in 2026. But if they can win 70 or more games, and we still continue to see progress being made in the minor league development, I think that's where the White Sox can consider 2026 another win in building up with, I don't know how many games get played in 2027. I'm being optimistic, probably a bit naive to say no games will be missed in 2027, despite that there will be a lockout that really freezes the offseason. But I am getting more hope after reading your guys' coverage this week that there is a path where the White Sox are a winning team in 2027 and contending again in the American League Central. Am I being too naive, optimistic, Jim, with that feeling?
No. I think this year, I think a success would be seeing how it happens. Being able to forecast a way where if they aren't the favorites, if Detroit, kind of rediscovers its old Illich form of,
no kidding.
Seeing a window and spending their way to it to try to make it happen. You're not going to go overcome that, but being a Hellraiser, being a team that can, kind of roils their way in, not out of hand. So I think, if their job this year is to make that look possible. And if they don't, then you can wonder what Chris Getz is doing.
Well, James, I hope you have a wonderful time in Arizona. Enjoy the weather, sir. I hope it is much warmer than what we've been experiencing in Chicago. Can't wait to read your reports. Have fun in Arizona, James.
I mean, I'll miss this body of water that I live next to that I will see nothing of the sort in the next few weeks. I don't know if warmth is worth dehydrating all the time, but
that trip last year really did a number on you, I think.
as he takes a drink of water.
The hydration charts, the urine colors. I think scored you.
There are some colleagues on the beat who somehow, despite lots of experience, are very poor at hydrating, and they kind of just illustrate the risk of me in a way that lives in my own head all the time. Don't be that.
Don't be that. Well, don't suffer a heat stroke. Again, we look forward to your coverage. And again, you can subscribe to SoxMachine.com to read James's exclusive coverage from spring training at SoxMachine.com/products. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen to the show and watch our videos, as we hope to have more video content from spring training, as we've been posting all the interviews during the off season through YouTube Shorts. You can subscribe at youtube.com/SoxMachine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. He's also in Blue Sky at jrfegan.soxmachine.com. I'm also in Blue Sky at josh.soxmachine.com. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.